So not every file in a SharePoint solution is going to be part of a feature. So it's going to be a lot of times when you need to deploy files directly into the SharePoint root, into the 15 Hive. So you might have things like application pages, or some people call them layouts pages because they live in the layouts, under the layouts URL underscore layouts. Maybe you're deploying images there. Control templates are a big item. Maybe you have a custom web service, so you may have to deploy a custom web service file into the 15 Hive. Visual Studio allows us to map SharePoint folders from the Visual Studio solution directly into the SharePoint root. So it gives us a really nice abstraction, so we don't have to worry about having to type all that in manually to figure out where it needs to go. You just add your mapped folder and you start putting items in it, and when you deploy your solution, the SharePoint, the solution package will take care of, or Visual Studio will take care of building the solution package to tell the manifest exactly where to put your files. There's also the project context menu, and you can add SharePoint folders via the project context menu by right-clicking the project in the Solution Explorer, and the menu is going to provide you with 3 choices. So you can, the first one is going to be the SharePoint layouts mapped folder, which that's going to correspond to the 15 Hive template layouts folder, and then the second one will be images, that corresponds to the template images, and then the third is just SharePoint map folder generic, and that opens up a little Explorer dialog box that displays all the folders in your SharePoint root, and then you can just choose any folder that you want. That will allow you to deploy your files to any location within the SharePoint root. One thing to keep in mind when using map folders is, because we're touching the SharePoint root, it's only for farm solutions. So obviously if we're in a sandbox solution, we don't have access to the 15 Hive. So in a sandbox solution, we can't do this. We can't map folders from that type of solution. So another thing that used to be difficult back in the olden days of SharePoint 2007 and different earlier versions of Visual Studio is you used to have to figure out the full assembly names. You would have to go into the global assembly cache and get the fully qualified assembly name. So that would include the public key token for your assembly, the version number, the full DLL name, all that stuff you would have to look up. And usually the hardest part was just going and getting the public key token, because you don't really know that until you've actually signed your assembly and deployed it into the global assembly cache. So what Visual Studio does, though, is it gives us this concept of replaceable parameters. So it lets us use tokens for values unknown at design time, and then the build process, when the solution is being built, it'll actually use a replaceable parameter token that gets replaced at runtime. So for example, in a say we're building an application page, and the one of the directives at the top needs to say that the full assembly name of the DLL that is hosting the application page, so your project. And just by using this token, the SharePoint.project.assembly full name token surrounded by the $signs, then the Visual Studio compiler and package builder knows how to build that and replace that when it builds your solution package. And the same thing for feature IDs. You can actually, although you can get those at design time as well, but it's just nice to have the token for it. And this works in the following file types. So XML files, we can use the tokens. ASPX, so like I was saying, the application pages. It also, ASCX, so those are the server controls. So if you're building a custom control, you can take advantage of these tokens. And then also in the the .web part files. So those are the files that are used to push your web part into the web part gallery, so the SharePoint knows how to instantiate your web part. So now we're going to take a look at an example of replaceable parameters in Visual Studio. Okay, we're back to the same SharePoint solution that we've been working with, and I'm going to add a mapped folder to my project. So I'm going to click on Add, and notice how I have choices. I have SharePoint Images map folder, SharePoint Layouts, or just generic SharePoint map folder. So I'm just going to click on that first, and it's going to bring up this File Explorer dialog. So here's my root. This is my 15 Hive, the root of the 15 Hive right here. And these are all the folders that are under the 15 Hive, so it just shows me where I can put things. So I'm going to cancel out of that. I just wanted to demonstrate that. So now what I'm interested in, I'm going to create an application page. So I know those need to live in the Layouts directory. So I'm going to click Layouts Map Folder. And notice how this is actually a best practice that Visual Studio it just did right here. So you don't want to deploy files directly in the same folder that all the system files are in for SharePoint. So in this case, we don't want to just deploy directly to the Layouts folder. We want to create a subfolder, and so that's what SharePoint did here. And what it does is it just takes the name of your project. So, but you can rename this to whatever you want. So I could say my Layouts folder if I want to. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add an application page. So I'm going to add a new item. And notice here's my choices. It's been filtered, so I can either deploy a user control or an application page. So we'll do application page. Visual Studio is doing a lot of work for me right now. So now notice how, let's close this, we have more room. Now we have our assembly directive at the top of the page. It's using the token for the full name. Otherwise, we would have to do something like this. You know, this is the Microsoft.web.command UI assembly, and we would need to know the version, the culture, and the public key token. Version and culture, that's pretty easy. I know this is neutral. I know our version is probably 1.0.0.0. That's the default. But the public key token is something that I don't know until I actually deploy this into the global assembly cache. So if I go into Solution Explorer, this key.snk, that's my strong name key, and that's what allows me to sign this assembly right here. So that assembly gets signed, gets put in the global assembly cache, and then after it's signed, then it gets the public key token signed to it. So I would have to actually go into the global assembly cache, find my assembly, and then copy and paste that. And that's how I used to have to do development prior to Visual Studio 2010. So this is still as good or better than Visual Studio 2010, obviously. But this is just to demonstrate how this works. So now what I'm going to do, let's go back to the Solution Explorer, and let's just go ahead and deploy this. I'm going to F5. So while that's being done, let's go to Layouts, Template, Layouts. We'll open Layouts. And notice how it's deployed my Layouts folder. And then here's our page right here. And I can open this with Notepad. And notice how it's replaced the assembly directive now. Now it's using the real assembly name. In our case, it's just SharePoint Project 2. Version 1.0.0, no big deal. Culture neutral. Public key token, that's great because I would have to look that up, and that's kind of a pain. So that got put in there automatically for us. So that's nice. So we just created an application page, and we deployed it to our 15 Hive.